In this video, I want to walk you through not the building of the outline, but the research that I did in order to know what to include in the outline. Specifically in this video, I want to talk about the paragraph in your reader response where you will analyze the bias of your source. And to analyze the bias of your source, you've got to look at the author, and then you have to look at the entity that published whatever it was that the author wrote. Okay? Here was the outline that you saw on Friday, and this is how I set the outline up. First, I talked about the author, and then I talked about the New York Times. So how did I find this stuff out? Okay, so let's go to the internet. Here's the original article, and we know that it was published in the New York Times, and we have the author's name right here. Now, in your paragraph, you're going to talk about the author first, but I'm going to disrupt that order because there's a very good tool that I think will help you understand both sides of this paragraph. It's called a media bias chart, and it's so cool. Librarians and researchers have looked at all different kinds of media and put different media sources into these charts so that you can look at the chart and find out how accurate the source is and whether it leans liberal or conservative. And there's different ones. This one is from All Sides, and here's their chart. And so we've got the New York Times right here, and we see that it leans left. And this is a pretty simple chart. It doesn't really talk about accuracy or credibility, just is it left, center, or right. Let's take a look at a more complicated looking chart. This one is from a university library, and whoa, it is super complicated. So in this chart, this axis tells you about objectivity, and so the further up top the source is, the more objective. The further down this source, the more inaccurate and biased it is. And then from left to right, you have the political bias. So right, very conservative, left, very liberal, and then in the middle, neutral. So if we look at the New York Times, kind of hard to see, but you see it's just a little bit left, and it's up here in the objective category. Okay, so bookmark, or find one of these sites that you like, bookmark it, and it will help you determine whether or not this is a credible, believable source. If you're using this source or this one, it's probably a garbage source because it's so inaccurate and so biased. Okay, so let's go back to our outline and let's focus on Bazelon. And so how do I know all this stuff about Bazelon? Well, if you go back here to the source, you can click on her name and you get a little biography of her, and you can sort of read the titles of what she's done and get a sense of who she is. She worked for George Soros, and we all know that that's a really liberal sort of thing to do. She worked at Slate. Hmm, I wonder if Slate is liberal or conservative. And so you go over here and you look and you see that Slate's more liberal than the New York Times. And so that gives you interesting information. Um, NPR, you can go back and find out that it's kind of center to left, but pretty high up on the objectivity scale. Colbert, we know that he's pretty liberal, and then you just look at what she's written, and just looking at the titles, it sounds like she leans left. There used to be justice, now we have Bill Barr. Well, I don't think she likes Bill Barr, do you? Um, Trump is politicizing the pandemics. Governors can fight back. That sounds like she doesn't like President Trump very much. The coronavirus becomes an excuse to restrict abortions. That sounds like she doesn't want abortions to be restricted. And so you can just kind of conclude based on these titles, and I think reasonably so, that she leans left. But you can take it a little bit further. Put her name into Google and see what comes up. And so she's got a Wikipedia page. You can read the Wikipedia page and, you know, get a sense that way. And so I did all of that, and that's what I came up with. Her articles, I'm just going to tell you the names and why I think they have a left focus. Left-leaning publications, Slate, NPR, Colbert, or, well, politically liberal broadcast, that would be Colbert. Okay? And then pretty easy, I just look up the New York Times on a couple of these media bias charts, and I know that it leans left. And so that's how I got all of this information. It's pretty easy, huh?